Welcome back to another episode of these crazy people that just eat me and can't stop talking about it. Today, our topic is what, Justin?
Can you get wasted away in Margaritaville? Looking for lost shaker assault.
Did you see that?
Meaning, can you drink alcohol on carnivore?
Can you? Well, physically, it is possible, but
Right.
naturally, alcohol is not carnivore. But like so many things, people bring things with them into their new way of life as a carnivore, and alcohol would be one of them. And probably one people don't talk about that much because, well, let's just say drinking in general is generally frowned upon, is at least in a macro sort of social context. I mean, obviously, people get together with their friends and drink, and it's okie dokie. But yeah, so it's not. But do you want to talk a little bit about what is in alcohol, what it does to the body, or do you have any insights other than it's actually not carnivore?
Yeah, sure. I mean, well, I'm sure anyone that's ever had a night where they drank more than what was planned, waking up feeling quite ill the next day. Alcohol is toxic to the body, and the body tries to get rid of it rather quickly. Um, on a carnivore side, on a diet side, beer itself is made from kinds of wheat or barley, which are carbohydrate laden in and of themselves. And then you have certain liquors that are like from rye. You have potato, but when you get down to your spirits versus your wines versus your tequilas versus your vodkas and your beers, it's about what went into it to make it and the distilling process and how far from its natural plant to um, the alcohol, how big of a step that was, and what that has affect. Like people that have celiac disease, there's a bunch of beers that they can't have, or they know they get really, really sick because of gluten. So the protein in wheat uh, being preserved or the leftover in the distilling process. So we can make this really complicated, but these are short ribs, so we try to make these as short and concise as possible. But what's interesting about carnivore is that a lot of people notice that when they go carnivore, they're more easily able to give up adversive behavior or addictive behavior, such as alcohol and other substances. I mean, not that I was ever a big drinker, but when I would drink on occasion, I'd hit a bottle pretty good, because why not? It'd be New Year's or whatever it is. But uh, now I really think twice because I'm like, I don't want the carbs and I don't want the plants. I feel like it's double or triple toxic um, to my body now compared to before because of eating so clean. Um, and I don't mean that as in people should be afraid if they are carnivore. I think you become a little bit more of a lightweight, and I don't know if that's because people tend to drink overall less after becoming carnivore, or if it is just because you're reacting to the sugars, the alcohol, and the carbohydrates together, and so your body is kind of wigging out a little bit.
Yeah, I kind of put alcohol in the category with coffee. It kind of depends on how you handle it and how much. I mean, the old saying is the dose makes the poison, right? So a little bit of alcohol probably isn't a big deal for most people. And like Justin said, when people go carnivore or even keto, they notice their cravings for these things tend to decline. A lot of people have reported that. So perhaps it's sort of the dysregulation caused by being on the wrong diet tends to escalate cravings, tends to make people more anxious and more depressed, and so they drink more, or they just don't feel good, so they want to feel better, so they drink something like alcohol. you know and I'll just start with the root substance we're talking about is the alcohol itself, ethanol. Probably the biggest reason not to drink it is because it is toxic to every tissue in the body. So, and of course, it can be hard on your liver. It can be responsible for, fatty liver, which eventually could cause cirrhosis and stuff like that. And so, particularly if you're well fed and then you drink alcohol, your body's going to try and convert that alcohol very quickly into something in the form of a fuel. First, it's going to make it less toxic, and then it's going to probably convert it into a fuel so it can be burned off. And if you already have a lot of fuel in your body, then it's going to store it as fat. So that's where a lot of visceral fat, fatty liver syndrome, and stuff like that are often exacerbated by alcohol. So that's one reason to avoid it. A lot of people mention when they go carnivore, their tolerance for alcohol goes down. So if you're used to drinking a lot and then you go carnivore, you're going to get probably become a lot more intoxicated uh, when you drink. So people commonly report that. So something to be aware of. You may not have the capacity you used to have. So it's probably a good thing as long as you don't overdo it and hurt yourself or something.
Everyone loves a cheap date.
Right? Save money. So, and then I'd say the other cautionary tale is what that alcohol comes packaged with, like Justin alluded. I know I've heard this many times, and as far as I can tell from all the reading I've done, it's not true. Alcohol itself is not sugar. It does not get converted back into sugar in the body usually. I suppose there's some way it could be converted into fat, and then fat somehow could be part of the process of producing glucose or something like that down the line. But anyways, that aside, it's usually sugars that are added to the alcohol that would be a direct problem if you're trying to go low carb or no carb. So, something like a vodka or a whiskey or something like that, a distilled alcohol, they generally don't have hardly any sugar in them, but they could have gluten and stuff like that from the grains that they were distilled from in them still. But still, it seems like most people who do drink continue to drink when they're a carnivore or something like that. The distilled alcohols actually um, uh, cause they have less reaction to them, especially if they don't have anything added. There's a lot of whiskeys and vodkas out there that have sugary stuff added to them. They're usually flavored. They'll be honey flavored or peanut butter flavored or passion fruit flavored or whatever it is, and those usually are sugars and other additives that are added to it. And of course, beer, like you said, it comes packaged with a lot of stuff that uh, is in the grain. I know there are like gluten-free beers out there now. They're kind of expensive and hard to find. And I even know a guy who would brew his own gluten-free beer because he wasn't a carnivore, but he became gluten intolerant. And so he really enjoyed his beer. So people can go to some pretty great lengths to get around those things, but you know a wine, it can have very little sugar in it or it can have a lot. And of course almost all wine has preservatives in it. There's a very long list of things that can be added to wine that don't even go on the label, and that's just because they've been making wine for so long. A lot of those things got what they call a GRAS status, or generally regarded as safe. And one of the most notable ones that is usually on the label is sulfide. So sulfide is a preservative. Um, and people, it's not uncommon to have kind of an allergic reaction to sulfide. Some people get headaches from it or whatever, even can even trigger migraines. So yeah, there's all kinds of stuff out there. And then of course, if you're drinking something that's sweet, for people who crave sweets, that can trigger craving to eat other sweets, or like Justin has alluded to in other videos, that constant sort of exposure to sweet stuff can actually, depending on the person, uh, you can release extra insulin just based on eating something sweet, even if it's non-caloric. So even something with 0 calories, if it's sweet, may spike your insulin a little bit. So it's a complicated topic, and again, I don't like to see everybody give up everything they enjoy in their life. And, it's all about being healthier and meeting your goals, and, not doing the fun things to excess, because The problem with doing the things you really like too much is eventually you have to give them up or they kill you. So you want to stay out of that zone, right?
Definitely. And, just to show that, we're not coming from any high place or anything. If someone, buys a 6 pack of beer or something, and they're like, oh man, this beer is really, really good. You got to try it. I'll take a sip, or I might have a half glass or something like that, if it's really, really good. And I know I'll regret it a day or two later or whatever, but, it's just something I know. I know after, in a few days, I'll be back to like 100%. Now, I did have an interesting occasion where I had like a almost an entire beer of this great one called Pirat or Pirate,
I think it's just
and it made me crave carbs like the next week. That was very interesting. It was a very sweet, fruity, kind of spicy, herby beer.
I think
It's
it's a
very
Belgian ale or something, right?
Yeah, it's a Belgian ale. Yeah. To me, it is absolutely delicious. I loved the taste of it. Probably loved a little best much. So it was just interesting that I did start to crave, and this was after, geez, I think I was like 17, 18 months carnivore by this point. So I had like no craving. Um, but so, just little things like that, where we tell these things not to make you afraid, but just to be aware of. If you do have a beer or wine or something, and the next week or something you do crave carbs, or the meat seems to be less satisfying, or you want something else, might be something to look at. You might be, for whatever reason, it has that trigger with you.
Yeah, and you can run into all kinds of cravings even on carnivore. Some people, they just start eating meat, feel better, and everything goes the way that they hoped it would go. And some people need a little tweaking, and usually that has to do with figuring out if you need more fat or you need more protein. Because a lot of times people start eating particularly fatty meats or doing a high fat, and then they're not getting enough protein because that fat is just shutting down their satiety right away, or shutting down their hunger right away because they're very satisfied, and then they're not eating enough protein. And the reverse can happen because we've seen a lot of people who just like up their fat and then they felt great, and they got right where they wanted to be and stayed there. So it can go either way for sure. So that might be a good way to see if you can get rid of some lingering cravings.
And a fun little fact about alcohol: when vegans drink, they have a tendency to go and sneak a piece of chicken or a piece of steak or fish or something like that. And that's primarily, because that's just how deeply eating meat is ingrained in our brain. You can show a vegan and a carnivore or an omnivore all meat on a screen, and there were parts of their brain that will still light up. And as we all know, when you drink alcohol, you lose your inhibitions. And so for vegans, they might have a little dirty little secret about sneaking a little piece of chicken or fish or steak.
Well, and I'm not going to be too surprised, even though, there's that article that shows a staggering amount of vegans start eating meat when they're drinking. I forgot what it was, but it was really a high percentage.
I want to say it was as high as 85%, but
Yeah.
it was really, really high. Yeah.
So I mean, even with a carnivore, I mean, if you start drinking, I mean, you're already not being, really you're drinking. You're not really eating just meat, but you know, you start loosening up your inhibitions a little bit, and you see that bowl of Chex party mix over there at the Super Bowl party. You might dive in. You never know. You might eat a bag of corn chips or cake or whatever. So I mean, a lot of times when people do drink, it winds up, it's on a special occasion, somebody's birthday, a holiday, or whatever. And of course, those are the times when there's all these tempting foods around. So that's probably a good reason to avoid it or minimize it or whatever, or at least be prepared. If you start drinking, it's going to be harder to say no. So
Yeah, which is
anyway,
why when I tell people if they're going to engage in something like that, do it when you're full, or make sure you got a steak cooked or something like that that you can go to, or, something decadent like a bacon cheeseburger or something like that. No bun, of course. That way you're prepared. You already know. I suggest getting a little tipsy and ordering a bunch of Flying Dutchman from In and Out. They'll be open.
yeah, and if you fill up on meat first, let's say, then you eat a 10 pack of Flying Dutchman like Sean does, then you probably won't be that tempted to drink very much less eat something else. So, all right.
I got one more question for you, Tom, or maybe it's two. I know you drink more than me, but
Oh,
how
thanks.
how are hangovers being carnivore?
Just
Because
just
usually
go
people,
ahead and out me.
do you notice any difference of hangovers? I don't think you would drink that much though to get hungover, but being carnivore, do you feel like they don't last as long, not as strong? And then what was your go-to hangover cure in college when you were really pounding it down?
I don't know. I can't remember the last time I had a hangover because it just, I mean, part of it's probably just age. You don't want to hurt yourself like that. You don't want to suffer anymore. So the moderating came in long before carnivore, did.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know. I couldn't tell you. Like I said, if anything, I'd worried it'd be worse because, like I said, your tolerance goes down. So it's probably easier to overdrink when you're carnivore, would be my guess on average. But yeah, and I don't know that I really ever had a hangover cure. I certainly, when I was younger, I had more than one hangover, but I don't know. I've heard all kinds of crazy ones. I knew this one girl, she would chug milk the next morning, and then eventually she'd get sick and she'd pass out. And then when she woke up, she was normal. I don't know how that worked. Sounded really rough. I don't know. So I don't know. And I hear about all these hangover cures that are, remedies that you could buy that are out there. And I hear people tell me all the time, oh man, it works awesome. And of course, if you're in, I think in Vegas and New York, they have services that our nurse will come and give you an IV and you're good to go in like an hour.
Oh, wow.
And then one I kind of was tempted to try, but I never did, was a cryogenic chamber. So supposedly if you got a hangover, you get in the cryogenic chamber and put your 4 or 5 minutes or whatever the maximum they'll let you do in there, and it supposedly snaps you right out of it. So that did pique my interest because I did like the cold therapy. It was awesome. Just not an easy place to get to. There isn't like one close by. So, but yeah, I don't know. I never really had a hangover cure. I mean, if you're lucky, you sleep it off, right? that's that's the most pleasant way to deal with with a rough situation like that. So
Yeah, for me, Party Smart does work. If you ever see that on the market, Party
that's like
Smart
a
does work. It's a bunch of herbs and stuff like that. Yeah, that
really,
stuff really does help. Iodine helps. Magnesium helps. Um, 5-HTP helps.
oh really,
Yeah. So primarily what you're treating is the brain, and electrolyte imbalance. I would imagine that element or one of those electrolyte things or a snake juice after a heavy night of drinking would probably help as well. Because like I said, it's the electrolytes, which is probably why your friend drank all that milk. Milk actually has the perfect
could be.
um, ratio of potassium to sodium in milk.
Could be. I mean, I've heard it's what when you're drinking, one of the reasons that people can get really sort of sloppy is it does drive down your blood sugar. And I did test that one time back when this is before carnivore, but probably like in my keto fasting days. I think I did something on the order of I was already had low my blood sugar was pretty low. I think I was fasting and I had a martini and I was checking my blood glucose like all night to see what happened. And sure enough, the martini made the blood sugar go down.
Oh,
So, and it's easy to get down those ranges where, like, if somebody called a paramedics or whatever, they checked your blood sugar, they'd start pumping glucose in you in a hurry. So, but but it's normal when you're used to it. So I think low blood sugar can sort of contribute to your apparent drunkenness, and I've heard that electrolytes are affected. Of course, you drink enough alcohol, and then when it starts wearing off, you're actually suffering with withdrawals. You can suffer from dehydration. I've heard that your brain can actually shrink a little bit because you're dehydrated so much. So I'm sure a lot of that plays into it. So, anyways, I think we put a fork in that one. You got anything else to add before we go?
No, I think that does it. Use alcohol with caution, just as you were before carnivore. And if you had a problem with alcohol before carnivore, being carnivore might help you with that. You might be able to get a handle on that monkey that's on your back. That would be a
Yeah.
good thing.
All right. Well, we thank everybody for watching. Leave us your comments. Maybe you got the ultimate hangover cure, or maybe you gave up alcohol altogether when you went carnivore. Maybe you got some other thing like coffee or alcohol that people like to talk about and whether they need to give it up or not to go carnivore. Leave us your comments then. Subscribe. Subscription is really important. It means a lot to us. Give us the old thumbs up. And whatever you do, eat some meat, feel better, and don't
Don't
fall
fall
down
down the
the
carb
alcohol hole.
hole.